Okay, folks, today's sponsor of WTF is Audible. Please visit audiblepodcast.com/WTFpod for a free audiobook download. Do it.
Lock the gate!
Are we doing this? Really? Wait for it. Are we doing this? Wait for it. Pow! What the fuck?
WTF.
And it's also, what the fuck? What's wrong with me? It's time for WTF. What the fuck?
With Marc Maron.
Okay, let's do this, what the fuckers, what the fuck buddies, what the fucking-ears, what the fuck nicks. This is Marc Maron. This is WTF, the podcast that you've grown to enjoy. I'm walking down the streets of New York City right now. Have not been to New York City in a few months, but it is a beautiful fall day. There is nothing better than a fall day in New York City. You know, people are out. They're not all exhausted and sweaty from the humidity. They're dressed, slightly. They're dressed comfortably, but you can just tell that they're filled with a vitality that has eluded them for the entire summer because it was drained out of them because of the relentless humidity. I haven't been here, but man, it is great. New York City is just like, I don't know how to explain it, but just walking down the street, I'm down here by, by where I used to live years ago, around 23rd Street and 3rd Avenue. It's just walking down the street, I saw a guy hawk something up and spit it onto the street. That it was an amazing moment, and no one noticed it. It was just one of those beautiful moments of humanity where this dude was just lumbering down the street and just in something. I don't know. You just don't see it every day in mixed company. And then there was the parade of methadone addicts, which I didn't even think existed anymore. Oh shit! There's a Dunkin' Donuts coffee. I don't know what is in that, but fuck. Now I'm not going to have any. Yeah, the parade of methadone addicts, and then like there's just one after the other, just emaciated, well-dressed women smoking cigarettes and moving very quickly. I love this city. I don't know if those are 3 examples of why you would love New York City, but there's a lady in gym pants with her dog who has, oh Christ, a ribbon in its hair. Look, I am heading over to, that guy looks exhausted. There's just so many people. You're just a part of one big organism here. I love it. I love being back here. So I'm heading over. How you doing, man? See, even I can walk down the street talking to myself into a microphone and not get very much attention. If I'm getting any attention, it's like, what the hell is that guy up to? Does he want to talk to me? No, I don't. I'm heading over to Ira Glass. I'm heading over to his office, to his studio and office. You know Ira Glass from This American Life. Obviously, many of you know him. He is a defining voice in public radio. I reached out. He said, sure, we're going to do this. Now, I like Ira. I enjoy listening to This American Life. I enjoy the knowing what's going to happen, knowing that, like, there's Ira, there's his forceful yet precious tone, his curiosity, and you know, there's also something that just seems so perfect and fragile and smart about This American Life that sometimes I resent it, although I know when I'm listening to it, as much as I find it slightly annoying how precious and smart and efficient it is, that I will be squirting out tears out of my face. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for the guy. I don't know much about him, but I've decided that we're both in the same racket. We're both microphone guys, and we're both Jews. And I think he's a different sort of Jew than me. I'd like to hear him say fuck. I don't know if he will. That's obviously not going to be the thrust of the interview. But I'd love it if Ira told some sex stories. But I don't know that that's going to happen. He's a respectable guy. See, that's what I think I keep coming around to. Oh, shit, I just missed a street because I'm talking to you guys. Jesus. Is that I feel crass. I feel slightly lowbrow all over the place. Raw nerve, energy, with just a peppering of anger and filthiness. And I think Ira is like he's higher than the rest of us somehow. He's a better man, a bigger man, a smarter man, a man in control of his game. So I don't know what's going to happen. But I think it's a meeting of two distinctly different types of I'm going to say aggressive Jew radio personalities, because I think he's obviously aggressive in his own way. It's just so much easier on the spirit than my particular form of expression. But I am nervous. I'm a little nervous because I'm going to his studio, which means his mics are going to be there. I don't know if he was thinking that, we would record on his equipment, but that's not going to happen. I brought my rig. I'm talking in it right now. I'm going to try not to let him sit in his chair because, being a radio guy, you get in your chair, you get behind your mic, all of a sudden it's your show. This is my show. What? This is my show. Comes in a bag. It's got a mic, 2 mics. So that's how we're going to go at it. Hey, buddy, you do shaves? You do? Okay. All right, thanks. Maybe I'll come back. I like getting shaves. There's so many restaurants here. And all of them have people in it. I used to eat at that place. South Indian Vegetarian Kosher Restaurant, Madras Mahal. Used to eat the buffet there. Where else would you see that? South Indian Vegetarian Kosher Restaurant. That is unbelievable. Look, there's people eating right now. It's not dinner time. Everything. You know what? I miss New York, but I wouldn't want to live here because I'm drained just walking down the street. There's another one of those well-dressed, emaciated women moving quickly, smoking a cigarette. Beautiful people here. It's a very sexual city. Anyways, I wonder what Ira thinks of that. I can ask Ira about that. Had 2 slices of pizza today. I had to eat them at Bella Napoli up on 49th Street. I like that place. They do a grandma slice, it's called. It's a thin crust Sicilian. Look, I'm not going to start with the food. I'll turn this back on when I get to Ira's. Sign in. It's Ira, right?
Huh?
That's Ira, right?
American Life.
Yeah, American Life.
Yeah,
you listen to that show? American Life?
No, I don't even know which station they are on.
Oh. Hey, all
What
right.
station they are on?
NPR. So it'd be WNYC.
Okay, I don't know if I got that.
It's a very good show. I think that if you told Ira your story, he would put you on the radio. Where are you from?
You mean originally?
Yeah.
Guyana?
Guyana. It sounds like a This American Life story already. If you have a family still there?
Where in Guyana?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just sign your name, I'll do this.
You'll do the rest?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm telling you, you could be on the show. Guyana. Okay. This is, I don't know. Not what I expected. Oh, it's old style. Oh, boy. Oh. This is a whole operation here. Hi. Hi, I'm Marc Maron.
How are you coming from interview?
Yeah, I'm going to interview Ira Glass.
Wonderful.
I hope so.
He's in this.
Yeah, that's him. I can recognize him. Yes. Hello.
Hey, Mark.
Yes, sir. Hi, Ira.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, you look different than your illustration on your podcast.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm the different. I look. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've done something different. I'm trying to look like you.
And now I'm going in the opposite direction.
Oh, so we're going there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you're going to cut loose, and I'm going to tighten up.
Exactly.
What's going on? Are we going to do this?
Yeah. I'm waiting. But let me hand this off to him.
Okay.
Let me just I'll just do one.
Okay. All right.
You can come back to our living room.
Okay. Hi.
Some water or anything like that?
I have coffee.
All right.
This is amazing. Everybody who works here looks exactly like I thought they would.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
I don't know either. I'm going to leave that open. As you know, as it is true sometimes, Audible.com is sponsoring this episode of WTF. That's Audible. That is audio books. That is something you like. That is something you may do. We're in the middle of the Ira Glass episode, and as you know, maybe if you listen to a lot of Ira Glass, and Audible also sponsors Ira Glass. So I don't really think that I'm telling you anything new other than if Ira hasn't gotten through to you about the Audible, about the free audiobook download that I'm going to give you. You can either get it from me or you can get it from Ira Glass. But I say get it from me. If you go to audiblepodcast.com/WTF pod, you will get a free audiobook download and a 14-day trial period, and you can enjoy many things. Now, here's what I would recommend you do if you have not done your free download from WTF. Go to audiblepodcast.com/WTF pod and get Terry Gross interviewing Ira Glass on Fresh Air. And just sit there and compare. If you do it before these interviews over, then perhaps, you could go right into that one and see how it compares. That's an idea. You can go off the Ira Glass grid, and I just started reading Freedom by Jonathan Franzen. Not that he needs any more press, but I'm enjoying the first 50 pages. The real trick is going to be, getting past that. But it looks like you can actually get Freedom as an audiobook. Go to audiblepodcast.com/WTF pod. Get your free audiobook download. On me. Or Ira. Your choice. Okay, yeah, so you got your tea, I've got my coffee.
Okay, so this is the studio that we do the show out of, and it is always a disappointment. I'm opening the door.
This is it?
Yeah, this is it.
Oh my God.
It's tiny, right?
Where's your chair?
Well, normally I sit there.
You can't sit there today.
All right, so you'll sit there.
Yeah, here's what we're going to do. I know you've got a board and we could do it on your equipment, but I decided that we have to break ritual. I don't want to spill that on the keyboard. Have you ever done that?
No. Back when we were in Chicago, we had this huge, beautiful studio at WBEZ, but when we moved here, we tried to just build something fast and cheap, and
this is what you got?
And it's not even really soundproof, and the architect blames the construction guys, and the construction guys blame the architect, and we never got to the bottom of it.
Look at this is American life.
Yeah.
This is the whole thing.
This is it's...
Except for the bureau in Israel and the bureau in West Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so there's a little mixing console with 6 inputs, and then, a couple of CD players, a couple of phono units, an ISDN line.
So I think you're a little older than me, right? How old are you?
51.
I'm 40. I'm going to be 47. So not that much difference.
Oh, under the rule of Birbiglia's wife, that means that you'll treat me well in this interview, because she says that in your podcast, you suck up to anybody who's older and you're mean to anybody who's younger.
Your wife says that about me?
No, Birbiglia's wife says this. Mike Birbiglia's wife says that about you.
No, I'm not.
She says that's the rule of the Marc Maron podcast.
Apparently,
she's like, you're totally safe because you're older than
somebody has rules. Somebody has created rules that there's some rule to my podcast.
Well, that's like saying it's not a rule. It's like she's more of an anthropologist to observe this in the field through observation.
Uh-huh. Well, I obviously am going to be pleasant. This is not an investigative piece, but I think that there's some things I need to know, because I feel like we're both microphone talkers.
Okay.
And that I've listened to your show and I know what's going to happen. Even if, see, the thing that I don't know about you is, where do you come from?
Okay.
And like, let's go like 12 years old. Were you bar mitzvahed?
Yeah.
And where?
Baltimore. I'm from suburban Baltimore.
Really? And you come from a large Jewish family?
No, I have an older sister and a younger sister.
That's it.
And then not a lot of cousins, not a lot of, it's a pretty small family, actually.
But your father's cousin is Philip Glass, is that true?
Yeah.
Now, so that means you're at the family gatherings and there's Philip Glass?
No, I've never seen him once at any family holiday, wedding, funeral, nothing.
Never?
I've never. In fact, I didn't really know Philip until 5 or 6 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, see, I had pictured this thing because when I read that, I was like, oh my God, they have these family gatherings and Philip Glass, everyone gathers around his new composition and they go, we don't understand it, but we think he's a genius. And that didn't happen.
No. I mean, there was like, no. There was a divorce in their generation. And so people sort of grew up, I think, pretty far from each other. I think Philip is definitely really close with his siblings and sees them a lot. And I think that they might have that experience that you're describing.
But not you.
But not us.
So now let's say you're 15 years old, 16 years old, you've got a car.
Yeah.
What would we be listening to if we're driving in your car?
Well, in the mornings in Baltimore, in the Plymouth Satellite that I was driving, the yellow Plymouth Satellite that used to be Grandma Frida's, but that I ended up with. I would be listening to, in the mornings it would be Johnny Walker, who was this sort of early proto-shock jock, who I got my first job in radio when I was in high school, writing jokes for him.
Really?
My first job was writing jokes.
That's interesting, because I just did an interview with Judd Apatow, who also started, his obsession with comedy very young, at 16. So when you were in the car, what kind of music were you listening to?
I mean, truthfully, like, music wasn't a big part of my life. Like, I mean, I listened to whatever was on the radio. I mean, I remember actually when I was a kid, Mark Nasdor, my best friend from across the street, at one point tried to engage me in a debate over who was better, the Beatles or the Monkees. And I remember thinking, like, wait, I'm supposed to have an opinion on this? Like, I really wasn't.
Well, that one you should definitely have had an opinion on.
But I was not inside the world of music in that way. I wasn't cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was in junior high school, I did magic tricks. I did children's parties. I made animal balloons. In fact, I just started doing animal balloons again on stage because I did it once and people were so blown away that I could make animal balloons.
Can you do it fast?
Yeah, I could totally do it fast.
Can you make swan hat?
I could. Yeah, I'm not so into the swan hat.
But which ones are your favorites?
I can make a very credible Snoopy.
Really?
That really looks like Snoopy. I can do an elephant. I can do a poodle. I can do a little mouse. I can do lovebirds. I probably could do more if I thought about it, but those are the ones I remember.
What's your version of the swan hat?
It's just the swan shape, the neck of the swan, I always found kind of problematic to make it stay in shape.
Oh, so you couldn't do it. You don't have anything against the...
I don't have anything against it.
Because that, for me, the kids would be more excited about that when you're like, come here, I'll put this on your head.
I could do a hat. I just don't like the swan part.
Okay, so but let's go over that. So now you're like a 15-year-old kid and you're entranced by radio.
No. No.
So how'd you end up writing jokes for the prototype of the shock jock or a talker?
For Johnny
anyways?
Walker.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't that I loved radio. It's that he seemed cool.
Okay.
Like every 15-year-old suburban suburban boy anyway in Baltimore thought he was really cool.
Right.
And we all listened to him. And in the being a kid, being a teenager in the mid-70s, that's right when Saturday Night Live started.
Right.
And so there was a lot of like cool man comedy for like a few years there. And so that just seemed like something exciting to do. Like in college, in my early years in college, I tried improv comedy. And a troupe actually, one of the people went on to Saturday Night Live.
Who?
Gary Kroger. He wasn't in for very long. He was like one of those transitional casts in between.
Yeah, I kind of remember it. Remember it. What in terms of what drew you to radio? How did you get involved with that at 16? What drove you to Walker's show?
I needed something to do for the summer of my senior year, and I had like a job making pizza, and at that point I had stopped doing magic tricks at children's parties.
I love your show. I listen to your show. I know I'm going to cry. And every time that I listen to your show, I do know that sometimes when I'm listening to it, I'm like, is it possible that he's just cool and you in terms of like the way you conduct an interview, that you seem very deliberate and very sort of softly forceful and very compassionate and then I get mad at you because I'm like how does why does he have such a big heart on the radio? Does Ira Glass ever say fuck? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, I definitely say fuck. In real life, there's a lot more cursing.
Really?
Than on the radio.
Of
course,
do you
all
yell?
the time.
Like, are you running around here like? Are the people that I just passed in the hallways frightened of you?
No, or not frightened of me yelling. I feel like I mean, in my early days running the show, I think I had a passive aggressive style that was really dreadful for the people I worked with, where I would get very, very mean to them. But I wasn't even totally aware I was being mean. I just thought like, well, this is the way we're going to do it. This is obviously the right way. Like anybody who could hear this piece would know that you take the music out there and then you got to do this. And just, I think that I was pretty bad. But people were politely forceful in letting me know that I was being a bad boss, and I feel like now the show's been on for 15 years, and I feel like I got a lot better. Like I feel like that's always in me, ready to happen. A kind of very deep bossiness of like just wanting it my way, But at this point now, everybody on the staff, or most of the staff, is as skilled as I am, and so it's much more like being in a band that's been together for a long time. Like we've gone through a lot together, and we all kind of and sometimes it's hard to make a decision, truthfully, because usually we'll come to decisions like everybody will agree,
Right.
or nearly everybody, but like sometimes we just disagree, and then it's really hard to figure out how to have a tiebreaker, sort of.
And who usually wins out?
I mean, either I or my senior producer Julie Snyder wins out.
Mm-hmm.
And usually whoever wins out is like whoever it means the most to.
The
You know what
story.
I mean? Like whoever like feels the most strongly. Like generally, like, you know, we have to go through so much material that we all understand. Like, we don't have to put it all out on the line. Like, if I think that one story idea isn't a great idea, but everybody else, you know, or a lot of people think like, yeah, let's keep going with it. Like, I'll keep going with it and keep going with it and keep going with it. With the thought of like, okay, well, it might be right and I might be wrong. And truthfully, like there have been, in the last couple of years, there have been a number of things that we've done that I was completely against for a really long time that turned out to be the very best things we did. Like last year we won 2 awards at the Third Coast Audio Festival, and both of them were for stories I thought like, this is not going to work at all. And one of them was this story about kids who were being raised, boys who were being raised as girls. Mm-hmm. And their parents letting them do that.
Right.
And I just thought, like, well, this has been covered, and there was a really good piece in NPR about this at all, and what are we really adding? And Julie Snyder, the senior producer, was very, very forcefully feeling like, no, there's this one way that it could work if we confine it to this one scene, and she turned out to be 100% right, and I think it won some big award. And then there was another story that year, same thing, I was sort of against it. And I was like, all right, if you think so, and then we did it, and
That's
then she was
interesting.
right.
Right. I want to get into what makes a good story and what makes a good This American Life episode in a minute. But
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
Like one of the things that I've noticed about your podcast is I feel like as a broadcaster, I feel like there's a couple of things you do that are so much better than I'm capable of doing, and one of them is that I feel like you're just a much better talker than I am. I think innately, you have the ability to sit in front of the microphone and just talk. I mean, maybe it just comes from doing stand-up and being used to just getting in front of people and just talking in a way that has a lot of feeling and a lot of heart. But I don't think I expose myself that much on the air. Like, I bet I don't expose my own feelings about anything in a year as much as you expose in any 10 minutes that begin any of your podcasts. And I think just as a personality type, like, I came to being on the air after a decade of being an editor, you know what I mean, a producer, and I think that that's still in me, and in all the work I do, I feel like I hide way more, and I have to remind myself to I mean, I don't have to remind myself to react to the people who I'm talking to and to be in the story in that way, but I don't do that much stuff that's really about my feelings, and I feel like it's not necessarily my strength. Like even in person, I feel like I'm always having to, in a conversation, push myself to talk about myself. And I feel in general, like just by disposition, much more comfortable asking people questions and listening to people and observing people. And I feel like my strength in the show is really as an editor. And then I feel like I can perform the show well enough and I can write the show well enough. But the part of the doing of the radio show that I like the most is actually the editing.
Well, I mean, my producer, Brendan McDonald, who's a genius with that, you know, I trust him exclusively with that because it's not my strong suit. And I really appreciate you saying that. But what's interesting to me about you saying that is that I don't know what the history of it is, but your voice and the style of your show now defines NPR. And I know it wasn't always like that because if you know, coming at it from when you did, it's 15 years ago and you started in radio. So what happened after you wrote jokes for Walker? I mean, how did you get to NPR?
Well, I wrote jokes for Walker, so it's like 1977.
What kind of jokes? Like you would sit there in the room with this guy who did you
No,
get
not in
along
the
with
room
him?
with him. No, not in the room with him. No, to me, he was like an iconic figure. He was like somebody on the radio. Like,
How did you feel when you met him?
I was really in awe, and he was a really sweet guy. But he was somebody who I'd heard on the radio, and I was always a little nervous around him. I never stopped being nervous around him, and he could not have been like a nicer guy. But I remember I sent him 3 pages of jokes, and what Walker would do is he did like a Johnny Walker Little News of the Morning that was like the Johnny Carson monologue.
Right.
There were topical jokes about stuff happening around Baltimore and national stuff. And he was like a local figure. He put out books, like he would do events and thousands of people would show up. And it was like a little risque in a way of like radio in the 70s. You know what I mean? And
Did he play music as well?
he was a DJ.
Right.
Yeah, he was a DJ who would talk in between, and then he had lots of sound carts which would have like people laughing and applause and a crowd. It was like a whole.
So watching at that time, if you were in the
It
studio,
was super fun.
Yeah,
like
because there's a lot of things going on.
there's a lot of things going
Actual
on.
noisemakers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's in this way that was really, really amazing. And I remember I would go in the morning down to WFBR, the AM station that he was on, and go down at 5:30 in the morning and deliver the jokes to him. And the jokes were like jokey jokes, like they were like, they were just corny. I mean, looking back, like they weren't sophisticated jokes. They were like, at the very best, they were like the monologue on like a late night talk show.
It's just funny because I couldn't imagine you writing jokes or doing jokes.
Well, I wasn't very good.
But how long did he keep you around?
Well, he wasn't, he would give me, he would throw me $15.
Come here, kid. Go get yourself
sort
a
of
sandwich.
Like, he would really he would get a couple of jokes out of it each day.
But he was helping you out.
I think that
Were you a lonely kid?
No, I had friends and stuff. No. It's more just like, I think he just thought like, oh, what the hell? I might get something out of this. Like, who knows where this will go? And I would go down and watch him do the show for a little while, and then I would go. And
so how'd you end up at NPR? That must have put a bug in your brain enough for you to stay in radio. You must have become fascinated at some point.
If anything, at the end of that summer, I was convinced I could not be Johnny Walker. Like, I understood that I was not a joke writer, and I was not a jokester.
Were you a radio personality, though?
No. Like, in fact, at the end of the summer, he said, like, you're going to go off to college. It's your freshman year of college. Like, you and I, like, let me record a little demo for you so you can get on your college station. And I was like, no, like, it made me so scared. I was like, I know that I'll be terrible. I don't want to get in front of the microphone. And especially to be in front of the microphone in front of him would just have been horrifying. And so like, no, he was like a super nice guy. He was this figure in Baltimore. Like, I can't get across like what a big deal it was. Like, I sent him off these jokes to the radio station, and I got a phone call from him, and it was him, which was shocking that somebody from like the radio would be calling me at home. And then he said, I'll send over my man to get you. And he had a limo. He had a limo. And I realized in retrospect, I think it's because he had so many DUIs in his youth that he couldn't drive. So he had a limo, and this African-American guy, this older African-American guy who drove the limo, and he sent over a limo. I had never been in a limo, and he drove me to a part of Baltimore that I had never been in, which is like this sort of rich part, Rowan Park. And he had this like really, what seemed to me to be a really big house, though in retrospect, like not that big.
Right.
And he had these paintings on the wall that looked like Rembrandt's. Like, this sort of super, like, chiaroscuro, like spots of light defining the figures, and they looked like old paintings, but then when you looked at the figures, you realized, like, oh, it's the Beatles in, like, helmets, and, you know what I mean? Like, and I just thought, like, he was, like, the coolest, it was, like, the coolest thing. And he had some sort of, like, video projection systems, and he had a copy of Star Wars, I remember, which had just come out, and he had on on, like, whatever VHS, format it was, Like, his whole life was crazy.
That was, like, it.
It was like, and I knew, like, that was not for me. I was I was definitely not heading for that. And so I came out of that and went off to Northwestern and was a radio TV film pre-med major and then
covering all the bases, huh?
My parents were sure that I should be a doctor.
Right.
And
were you at all?
I mean I didn't know that I didn't want to be and it wasn't clear what I was
happy.
doing.
You might, for at least 2 years, you could tell him you were still pre-med.
Well, and they kept at it. Like, my mom didn't drop that until my mid-30s. Like, I was on, like, I remember it was after I was on David Letterman. She finally said, like, oh, maybe it's okay if you don't go to med school. Like, I'm gonna let that go. No, I had my own, like, national radio show.
What business is your father in?
My dad's an accountant.
Oh, so it was like they wanted
me
secure.
They were like, they weren't
afraid, right?
You have your book Jews and your money Jews, and they weren't book Jews, they were money Jews.
Right.
And they were like, and because they both grew up in really poor households, and the drama of their life was like getting to financial security, and so the thought that wasn't what any other kids were going to do was really
Yeah,
terrifying.
and I think that's a misunderstanding that some people have about their parents is that, they're not stifling you because they want you to do something because they're thinking for themselves. They're not thinking, it's not narcissistic.
No.
They're frightened
Yes.
that you will be lost
Yeah.
or broke.
Right.
And it took me a long time to do that because I think a lot of people fight with their parents, sort of like, fuck you.
Why was that an issue with your parents? They wanted you to like get a real job.
Well, my parents were so bad at parenting, really, and really were emotionally not cut out for it, that they just assumed I would make do somehow because I was a fairly charismatic kid. But there was a point there where I just screwed up in high school. I barely made it out of high school, and the last year, because I always was one of those people that was, Mark just doesn't apply himself. He's really bright. Like, as a fuck you, I got straight A's and, got into college. And then I did the pre-med thing, or I said I was for a year, but I just don't have the discipline to keep studying relentlessly. I didn't see the payoff of it.
Yeah.
Did you end up doing well in college?
Yeah, I did fine in college. Like I was a super hard worker.
Were you taking biology classes?
Yeah, no, I went up all the way through organic chemistry and I could have kept going with it. I mean, after my freshman year, I worked in the shock trauma unit at University of Maryland Hospital for part of the summer, and then the other part of the summer I just looked for something in the media, and basically I went around to all the radio stations and TV stations and ad agencies.
Looking for what exactly?
In Baltimore, looking for anything. Like I didn't even know what I was looking for.
So you really had no idea that you were going to be a radio personality?
Nothing at all. No, I had no special feeling about radio. If anything, like most people, like I was interested in TV. Like I had no interest at all.
But what was it? Was there a point where you had a human experience that like was compelling you towards?
Yeah. And the human experience was that in looking for a job that summer after my freshman year, somebody at like the rock station, at the album-oriented rock station, I remember in the basement on Reisterstown Road in Baltimore. Yeah. He was like, "Well, I can't give you anything. We don't have interns." But a friend of mine from University of Maryland, he's working at this outfit, National Public Radio in Washington D.C. And this is 1978, so NPR had only existed for 6 years. And he's like, see this guy and maybe he's got something for you. And so I went to NPR in DC, never having heard of them or heard them on the air. Yeah. And, most people hadn't heard of them. They were tiny. Yeah. And just kind of talked my way in with this guy, got them to create like a summer internship for me in their promo department, and I like wrote promos for them. And
for NPR, you wrote promos for NPR
for the individual shows. Yeah. Because if you think about it, they've got daily shows that have to turn out a promo every day. The show, and then one of the producers was on staff. This is really early in NPR. He was on staff just to invent new ways to do documentaries, and his name was Keith Talbot, and I would do. Because I had a lot of time on my hands because I'm the intern, I would do promos for his shows that would recreate the sounds of those shows. So he would have original music, and he would have they were really beautiful, beautiful shows. Actually, a lot more innovative than the show I do now.
Wait, you said so there were a lot of sound textures. There would be external stuff, and there would be internal stuff, and there would be music.
And he would do stuff like he would have the characters and the stories narrate the stories, and he did stuff that was like that. This shows just felt like nothing I'd ever heard on the radio, and he was working with this one guy, and so basically I did stuff for him, and he was impressed that anybody in the promo department was actually aspiring to anything, and he was impressed that I could actually make the promos feel just like the shows, and he hired me. He gave me a paid job the following summer as his production assistant, and then from there I just jumped from job to job to job because he was a really amazing person to work for. And now so half of everything I know about radio I learned from him while producing stories for him.
So and what was the show called?
I mean, it went under different names. It was called Radio Experience. It was called Option. It was part of a series called Options. Like it went from name to name to name.
But how was that moment where you had heard the show that you'd been involved in radio, and radio had an effect on your life, just whether or not
in a really small way.
Well, I guess, but it sounds to me that even when you were listening to Walker or working for Walker, that even if it was just on, the guy had an effect on your life. Yeah, that radio had an effect on your life, and that mystery of radio. Because when I was in high school, there used to be this junior high, this guy Bobby Box on KQEO AM, who everyone listened to. And I remember when he came to host a dance at our school, and he turned out to be a very, very short, very ugly man who wore a very unattractive suit. And there was that moment where you're like, the illusion of radio is incredibly powerful. Yeah. And so now you have this experience where you're at NPR, and something this show affects you because the textures and the places you could go in your own mind because of the way this show was produced was overwhelming to you.
It was overwhelming. It was exciting. And there was a guy who worked for him. Did you ever hear, you're from LA now, right? But how long have you been in LA?
Not that long, since 2004.
There's a guy who's been on the radio in LA for a long time named Joe Frank, who was on KCRW. And he would just get on the mic. He would write these stories and tell these stories. And he had such a magnetic way of telling a story where the story would start and he had this incredible, he was just an incredible performer. And just like the stories, you couldn't even figure out like where he was going or why you were still listening, but you could not turn away from it. And at the time that I was working for Keith, Joe, he was producing Joe, and he's like, all right, well, your first assignment is you're going to help this guy get his stuff out. And I had never had the experience of hearing something on the radio like that was that good. You know what I mean? Like that seemed like that interesting. Like I loved Johnny Walker because it was funny and because he seemed cool. But I never heard something that was emotional in the way that like a great like movie was emotional, and where you just get caught up in it and your feelings get caught up in it, and you just can't stop listening. Like I had never had that experience with the radio until I was working for Joe and for Keith, and that just got me really, really interested. That got me really excited, and so basically I tried to just like learn how to do what they were doing. All the other parts of it, learning to write for radio, learning to perform on the mic, like all the other parts like that came very, very, very hard for me.
And now when you say that,
I'm learning to be a reporter. Like I taught myself to be a reporter.
And when you say a reporter, when you're conducting an interview, I mean, when you're listening to somebody, I mean, a reporter is, you know, when it comes to news is one thing, but a reporter when it comes to emotions and having this follow through where you're acting when you're in the interview and you realize that we can go deeper with this and there's a piece missing. You find that you do that instinctively, or you have a plan when you hear a general story that you're approaching.
Well, it's both things. Like I have a plan. I definitely have a plan, but like the most interesting moments come from something that just happens. Somebody's talking and then you just follow them or lead them based on that thing that they say.
And do you find that, because this is relatively new to me, listening to people, and when you say that like I express more emotion in 10 minutes than you feel that you do in general, you know, when I talk to people, the only way I know how to do it is talk about myself and engage on that level, and then I find that people talk almost, they want to talk and they no longer remember that they're having a conversation on microphones.
Yeah.
And I'm dealing with professional people, and a lot of times you're dealing with people who are not professional talkers.
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
but I think that would work with not professional talkers as well.
What was your first break in terms of getting on the air?
It's sort of like, to say a break going on the air, it isn't like in other parts of show business or something. You know, like I had, even in those things I was doing with Keith, like I would appear in them sometimes because I would go out and get the tape. And so that was like really early on. But in terms of just like doing something that was my own story, I mean, I kept trying to do it all through my 20s, and I wouldn't.
Going out, finding stories, finding subjects to interview,
pitching them to editors, getting them on the air, and little things would get on the air, you know, now and then, all the time. But I wasn't very good at it. It took me until I was. I mean, I started this when I started NPR when I was 19, and I would say I couldn't competently like go out and get a story and write a story that sounded anything like that sounded good until I was probably 27 or 28. And
wow.
I feel like I don't say
that sounds about right. I mean, 8 years to really, hone your craft on a microphone, that sounds normal for a comic, for anybody.
Okay.
To find your voice and to figure out how to be comfortable with it and to find your groove. That sounds about right.
Okay.
Do you have a lot of those old tapes? Do you listen to them and ever say like, oh my God, that was me?
I do have them. I never listen to them, though there's one that I play when I give speeches.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just to say, like, this took me a really long time, especially when I'm talking to journalism students and things like that, to say, like, it took me a really long time. Like, it took me, like, longer than anybody I know to get competent at that. And I play them something from when I was 26 that's just, like, terrible. And I play it because I feel like sometimes you hear people who, end up having decent jobs and decent work, and you hear them say like, oh no, I wasn't that good at the beginning. It's like when you like a model saying like, oh, I wasn't pretty in high school or something like, and I feel like no, I can prove this. And I say this is like not from year like 2 or 3 or 4. This is from year 7 when I'm about to play you. Like I was 26. I've been doing this for a long time, and it's horrible.
But it's interesting too. You're a singular voice. I mean, which is no easy task. I mean that by all critical standards. I mean, if you were to go by broadcasting models, like in terms of what I do comedically, I wouldn't call myself an entertainer. I'm not even. I know what sort of what tradition I'm doing. But, I'm not very consistent a lot of times, and I'm very raw, and I'm willing to take those risks, and I find the people that understand me and like me. So your voice, in terms of how you do radio, it wouldn't be like a traditional radio voice.
No.
And it wouldn't be, I think that at another time someone might have heard it and say, what's this kid doing? But now...
No, and in fact, I got that when we started doing this as a national show. When I started doing This American Life, like that was one of the reactions we got from program directors, which is just, there was a feeling of like, at that point I'd been a reporter for NPR, and there was a feeling of like, well, he's nice as the reporter, but like he can't be the host.
Can't
like,
drive a show.
Yeah, like where's the adult? Like where's the adult?
Yeah. Where's the adult? Is there a grown up in the room?
Well, seriously, like
stop playing with the knobs.
Well, kind of. That was totally a thing of just like,
who is this kid?
They really, yeah.
And this was, and you were carried by a few affiliates, or like at the time that was happening, maybe you were on 1 or 2, and then you were trying to get it a wider.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And program directors were like, this kid is horrible.
It wasn't like he was horrible. It's just they found it confusing. Like there was nothing else that sounded like that on the air. And
now everything sounds like that on the air.
Not
Ira.
to me. No, I don't know what you're talking about. No, have you listened to Morning Edition and All Things Considered? Those people were.
I just mean that there is a style, that This American Life style, that there are certain comics you use who I know, like Mike and Rakoff and Sedaris. There's a tone to reporting and personal stories that you hear on NPR that definitely seem to be modeled after the way you present. And I believe that there's a lot of aspiring male and female Ira Glasses in the world of public radio.
Well, good luck to them. That's what I say. My best wishes.
And do you feel that you are doing, like, because you say that you're not honest or emotional or whatever it is that you're holding back, but it seems to me that you're pretty true to yourself, unless you go home and you're like, I'm home, finally I can yell.
It's not like that. I feel like I'm honest in the stories, and I give my honest reactions and say things that I honestly believe, but I'm just not there I'm not as personally on the line as in any of the little monologues that you do at the beginning of your podcast, where you say, well, I'm going to talk to this guy, but I was kind of pissed off at him for a few years, and then I acted sort of like an ass, but then I apologized, and now I'm going to see him again. It's going to be a little awkward.
Yeah.
Like I never do any of that. And also the fact that you're doing it, you don't even seem to be doing it off a script. Like I could show you the scripts that I'm doing. Like I'm doing everything off of
Really?
I write it down beforehand.
I don't write anything down.
Yeah, no, it's a really different set of skills. Like I feel like you have a really different set of skills. Like I'm coming at it from a really different.
It took me a long time to do that, though. I mean, I did radio. I actually interviewed you once on Air America, on Morning's Edition, during the campaign.
Wow.
I was the morning show at Air America when it was up at WBRL. Is that what WB?
And did I come in? I remember going into Air America.
Came in,
yeah, I remember coming in.
And I was the guy there, and you were talking about Kerry, and you were talking about how you weren't that into him, but we sort of had to be into him at that time. And I remember interviewing you, and I remember being nervous at the time, but it was a group situation. It was sort of a liberal morning zoo. And I always worked with other people in radio, and I needed to have a booth full of guys, listening to me so I could gauge, whether I was hitting or whether I was connecting. But when I learned to talk to myself or talk just into a mic and have the headphones on, I was thrilled. It was a huge breakthrough for me to be able to have a consistent stream of consciousness on a radio mic. I can't do that on a stand-up stage. I can't do what I do on the podcast on a stand-up stage
because it requires a different kind of focus. You can't do it with people.
The context is laughter. I mean, the context is da da da. I'm going towards a laugh.
Oh, of course, right.
And if the laugh doesn't happen, then on some level that's failed, or else on some level I have to accept that it's entertaining in a different way. Whereas when I'm talking like this, or I'm talking alone in my garage, that I'm talking directly from my feelings, and most of the conflict and struggles that I have decided are valid. And I've decided that the internal struggles of what I've done in the past, what I'm thinking about now, and who I am as a person is really what I do. And in a lot of my interviews, and this one included, on some level, is me becoming a better person. I don't know if you realize that.
Wow.
But only in the sense that, like, I was never a guy that talked to a lot of people. Like, I have friends, but I always talked at people. I never had long conversations that were actually a back and forth where I listened and took things in.
Right.
Because I was so self-absorbed. So the whole process of the podcast
is so interesting to me.
An experiment in humility.
There's this thing that Keith, my mentor, used to say, where he said, a story, if it's working, is always an answer to the question, how should I live my life?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what you're saying is the structure of the podcast. You're saying that that's kind of the structure of the interviews, that it's sort of like you're looking for the answer to a question for yourself.
Well, really, when I listen to you, or even when I'm coming over here, my impression of the world that you live in is sort of a rarefied air to me, that I believe that, like, you have a lot of disciplined people that were relatively, decently parented, that have a certain amount of discipline. You have a structure. You seem to all be fairly sophisticated and educated and read books and things. This is the myth that I put together.
Yeah, I know, boy. I want to take these point by point, but yeah.
And that, that your audience is very sophisticated in the sense that, like I am in the middle of things. I'm a bright guy, but I can also be very crass and very, sort of misguided in a lot of ways, and I make a lot of mistakes. And I look at this as like, that is radio perfection in some in a way. Huh. And now I have to go in there and feel small, like I'm walking over here going, oh God, now I gotta, Ira's this, he's Ira, and everyone, he's this mythic presence. He is the perfect radio, and even when I'm talking to Berbiglia, I'm like, you guys, you don't frighten people. You don't frighten people.
I don't frighten people.
No.
He doesn't either.
That's right.
Yeah, no.
Not so much.
No. Yeah.
And there's part of me that always is struggling to be accepted, but I know that just by my natural intensity and my self-involved, kind of spinning, that people are going to be like, oh, Christ, Maron's here. No one's going to say, oh, Jesus, Ira Glass is going to spoil the party. That has never happened.
I think it could happen for some people, but yeah. I totally understand what you're saying. No, I think that the aesthetic of what I'm making and who I am by personality is like, I want the material to, I want to be liked. Like, I want people to get the work. I want people to get caught up in it. And like, that's its primary motive. And so the notion that we would make something that would be so in your face that people would get mad at us, like, it isn't, like, somehow that is not who that's not who I am.
Or even to allow yourself to be rudderless. I mean, to have a lack of control around what you're doing. I mean, which is the way I'm choosing to do what I do.
Yeah.
That, like, if you were to get on your show and go, I don't know what the hell's going to happen today. I don't feel right. I'm not comfortable with this story. I'm an idiot because.
See, but that would be great great radio. I wish I were the person to pull that off.
Well, why can't you? Well, that seems to be.
Well, I could. I think. I guess. Well, I don't know.
What are the struggles what are the inner dialogues that Ira Glass has in terms of insecurity, or in terms of anger, or in terms of your process when you're creating something, as an artistic person, as a creator, what are the struggles that you have?
I mean, partly it's just the struggle to just make the thing interesting. Like, some of the stories are just not inherently interesting. Let me think for a second about like what you're really asking me.
Well, have you ever said, I can't do this anymore? You might not just have that in you.
I don't know. Like the last, truthfully, like the last couple months, this summer somehow has been so horrible for me, where I thought, where we were doing a tremendous amount of production, a tremendous amount of stuff on the show, where I thought I was going to get a break during the summer. And then I stumbled onto this one story that I just thought, like, oh, I have to do this. And then we needed me to do this other story just to fill out a show. And there was a story that we did last week on the radio show about this policeman named Adrian Schoolcraft. And it's kind of an amazing story. He secretly taped on his job at the NYPD for 17 months, including all sorts of stuff where his bosses were telling him and the fellow officers to do things that are illegal. Making illegal arrests, and also taking real crimes and downgrading them to lesser crimes so their stats look better. And so we have him, and we have the reporter who broke the story, and we have these guys who are experts on this kind of thing. We have the tapes, like all these incredible tapes of these cops being bossed around by their bosses. And really dramatic stuff happens to Schoolcraft as a result of him. There's a huge retaliation against him, which he records
within the force,
which he records.
Like Serpico.
I guess. Yeah. And the entire time I was working on the story, I wanted to kill myself and kill everyone who was making me do it. And, because I just didn't want to do one more story.
So it was just about the work.
It's about the volume of work, and also feeling like with something like that, at very best, all I'm doing is taking the reporter who broke the story for the Village Voice. At the very best, I'm like doing a cover version of a song that he's already recorded perfectly. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like at the very best, all I'm going to be is transparent. And then it's a really complicated technical thing to do. Like it's 40 minutes of radio, and it's like you're weaving in all these different voices and all this sound, and you're starting off with, like so much material. Just the interviews themselves are 7 or 8 hours. And just like making the thing go is just like such a technical kind of, it's just a series of decisions, one after another. There's no shortcut to do, but just to like listen to it and then listen to it again and listen to it again and recut it and think about it. And should this part be in script or in tape?
Right. It's a lot of work.
It's a crazy amount of work.
And it seemed unending. So the dread came.
Meanwhile, while we're in the middle of negotiating various contracts, and I'm supposed to be doing the pledge drive, and I'm writing pledge spots for Alec Baldwin and going into the studio with him. And, and we have a show where we sent 2 people to Iraq, and we have, I'm occasionally getting drawn into discussions on like, what should the shape of this really be? And, just like a lot of things going on around here at once. And, and we have, I don't know. It feels like a lot of whining.
Right.
And so it's like, it's just like too much of a thing.
Yeah. It's
and
overwhelming.
then I feel like also as a show, I feel like we should constantly be reinventing what we're doing. And if and in these weeks where I'm caught up for 3 or 4 days, just like in my room writing, there's no time to actually talk to anybody or think about like, what's the next thing we're going to make up that no one's ever done. Like this past year, we've been on this huge effort to not only do more sort of hardcore investigative kinds of stuff, like these big shows about Haiti and healthcare and things like that.
Yeah.
But also just like weird stuff that we thought would be fun. Like we did a show of stories that our parents pitched to us.
Right.
Which was like incredibly difficult, weirdly, because the story ideas are such hard ones to do. And a show where we went to the nation's #1 party school, and a show where we basically just dropped into small towns in Georgia, and each would have a day or two to find a story. And and I feel like we need to be like finding more contributors and new contributors. There's like a lot of things that I feel like it would be nice if we could just run at as a staff, but like there's no time to think about that.
Have you ever had that moment where, because you're busy, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever have moments when you're interviewing people in these different walks of life where you actually think like, I'm not doing a real job?
No, I never think that. It feels like a real job. It feels like a real job.
But you feel that is your story personally as interesting as the stories that you're chasing?
No, I don't feel like my story is as interesting as the stories I'm chasing. I mean, the stories where it's good, it'll be somebody who's saying something that I find that I can relate to in a particularly personal way. But that can be almost any kind of story, really, if the person is expressive enough and kind of the right kind of connection happens between me and them.
It's like, it's so weird because
do you feel like, is this really a job? That's like a question that happens for you?
Well, what the question is that, when I look at my life or the scope of my life or what my life is, because what you responded to in my voice is that, I spin a lot of plates, all the time, and they're the same plates. Like, there's a point where I'm sort of like, I don't know if I'm ever going to change.
Right, I know, but the thing that makes something, good is if somebody's talking in a way where it's relatable, and I feel like the way that you talk about yourself is relatable, and so it's possible for there to be a connection that has so much feeling as a listener.
Well, I am confident in that, but a lot of times, like, I wonder, like, for instance, like I've actually pitched stories to your show, and this is how weird I am. Yeah, like I'm on the list, and occasionally I've mailed one in, but like I don't have a sense like of my life being like, there was this, like, I don't remember what the show was that you were doing, but I had this incident happen to me that I, for some reason in my mind, thought like this would be a This American Life story.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, I don't remember what show it was for.
It doesn't matter. Like, what do you remember the incident?
Of course I remember the incident. The incident was, I was divorced. I was in the middle of my divorce, and I'd met a woman, and we started having a fling. And it was very intense. It was very sexual. It was crazy because she would only come over during the day and whatnot. And she said she had been, she was separated as well, and we were both sort of heartbroken and this and that. And then after a certain point, I break it off, and she shows up at my house at night, sort of half drunk, saying, "I'm here." And I'm like, I don't understand. And she goes, "Didn't you want me here?" And I'm like, "No." So I thought she was losing her mind. It turns out she tells me after a while, she finally fesses up, 'cause she keeps coming at me after a certain point. She didn't want to end it. And she fesses up that she had never been separated, that she had told me she was separated, that she was still with the man she was with. They had 2 kids, and that she was doing it behind his back, and he had caught on and had set up an email account that looked like my name.
He had set up an email account
to look like me, and was sending her emails to meet me and stuff. Okay? And so she was showing up thinking that I had told her to come over with this email, and it turned out it was her husband, or the guy that she lived with.
Wow.
So he knew all of this, right? And then, like, when she came over and told me that, I thought to myself, well, I don't know this guy. This could get me hurt. This is a lot of trouble. And I really had no idea, and I felt like a victim in this situation to a certain degree, because I wouldn't do that. Like, I call her phone to tell her to make sure she deals with this, like on her way home. And then he answers the phone. And I go, he goes, "Who's this?" I go, "It's Mark." And then I knew the guy's name by that point. I said, "Is this so-and-so?" He goes, "Yeah." And and I just said, "Look, I don't know. I didn't know anything about this. I would never have done that to you. I feel horrible about what I put you through, because I certainly wouldn't have done that had I known you guys were still involved. And I was misled, and I feel awful about it, and I just want to apologize for that." And he goes, "Well, I appreciate that. And at least somebody's telling me the truth, right?" And then she, after a week or so, she sends me an email and copies him on it, saying, "You guys, I screwed everything up. You guys should really be friends. You guys would get along great together. I'm an idiot." And it was just crazy. And then I had run, I thought this guy was going to kill me, because there was this other point where he knew who I was, and he saw me in my car, and he chased me down in his truck.
After this?
No, this was in the middle.
In the middle of it.
Yeah,
okay,
I don't know. Okay. And he was up alongside of me, and I didn't know who he was. And he goes, "You're that comedian, aren't you?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "You think you're a pretty smart guy, don't you?" I had no idea who he was. I go, "I guess so." He goes, "Yeah, all right. I know who you are," basically, and storms off. So I felt threatened, and I realized who he was. And I thought that, for some reason, was an American Life moment where I called her, and I got him on the phone, and we had...
And you and he make it right.
Yeah. It was sort of dramatic. But then I run into him again in a parking lot in a bank. By this point, I knew what he looked like. And I'm walking down the bank, and he's walking towards me. And it was one of these words like, "What, am I going to get hit? Where are we with this?" And he literally was like, "Hey." I'm like, "Hey." He's like, "Look, I just want you to know that everything's cool with us. And that, we know common people. And, that was a hard part of my life. And, but, and I said, "Well, I apologize."
He says this to you.
Yeah. And that, I just want you to know that I'm sorry I behaved that way, and I chased you down in my truck and that kind of stuff. And that, and I said, "Well, is everything working out or what?" He's like, "We're trying, and I appreciate your honesty in that." And we walked away from it. It's crazy.
That's a crazy story. Though I have no idea if that could be a story on the radio on our show. And it's not clear to me what is that story like
Yeah,
mean?
tell me what does. Okay, so let's approach it like an American Life story. Now, what do you look for when you do that?
I mean, there's got to be a plot. The plot's got to be surprising. So it's got that. And there's got to be somebody to relate to. So it's got you. So it's got that. But it's like, what's the story about? Is it about like you're being caught off guard twice in this thing where first you think the relationship is you and her, and you've got this fling going, and then you find out, no, it's not that, because she's been lying about her situation, and then you're scared, like you think it's a second situation, right? Like, so it flips from like
I could
one
get
kind
killed.
of,
I don't know this guy.
right, and then it would have a period where you're scared, right?
Yeah.
Like, so there's a first period where it's just like easy, the second period it's scared. And for that to really work best, the first part has to seem really easy and she has to seem great. And in the second part, your perception of her has to totally, it sounds like it did totally change to like, is she nuts? And what's she doing? And suddenly, and this figure who seemed like, oh, this figure of fun, suddenly it turns out to be like this totally creepy, who are you sort of figure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. But what it would, and then it flips again, because now he's the frightening figure too. At first she flips from being kind of a sympathetic figure in your life to an unsympathetic figure, and then he flips from being this frightening figure to being like, okay, we can understand each other. And I feel like what you'd need is something that you plant at the beginning of the story, or some question that's going through your head, or some anxiety that's going on in your life that can resolve with him.
Oh, okay.
With that moment.
I see.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's almost like it needs a through line, or it needs a mission in a way as a story. It needs a question at the beginning. It needs you to be struggling with something that gets resolved in that moment with him on the phone.
Well, I think that if it was anything, it was that, in my reaction to my ex leaving me, I reacted out of spite, and I did everything I could, include, do a one-man show about her out of spite primarily. And I did everything I could to make her life difficult for leaving me. And this guy was in a similar situation, though they had kids, and
Right.
that me having this moment of empathy with him and realizing his pain and how he handled it, which was very different than the way I handled my situation, was really a higher road. Yeah, I don't know what he put her through, but if I were him, I would never have stopped hating me.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah, well,
That's interesting. That's interesting, especially that, and just structurally in his story, if your character was looking for the higher road from the beginning in some way. I mean, to lay it all out like this, it sounds so corny. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Well,
it all sounds
really.
like such corny building blocks or something. But
what are the fundamental building blocks? I see what we just did with that story, but when you have a story, what has to be present for you?
I mean, mostly, like the thing has to be. I mean, it's weird, partly it's just the fact pattern of the story has to be kind of interesting, and the world of it has to be kind of interesting. It's like a song. Like some songs, the melodies are just like more appealing just inherently, and that's true for a story too. Like the characters and the setting and the plot are just inherently more kind of exciting to listen to, so it needs that. And then just in terms of the way we talk about it here amongst ourselves, there has to be a plot, there has to be individual scenes and moments that you can name where things change and people see something different, and people where things are revealed, where there's tension, normal dramatic tension, and things come to a head. And then because it's radio partly, and radio is such like a talky medium, you want there to be some idea in it. You like I think generally most radio stories work best if they're described, if where they lead you to is some thought about the world, either that you've had before but haven't really felt so much, or that you haven't had before. And so you want the plot to be surprising, you want the idea about the world to be surprising. Again, to lay it out loud like this sounds very formulaic, but within that structure, that's kind of what, within the structure of what we do, which is super traditional storytelling. I mean, it really is just like, things proceed chronologically mostly on the show, and we're telling very traditional sorts of stories and getting very traditional kind of like narrative satisfaction out of it. Like that's what you need. Can I say, like, the word that the way that you constantly describe yourself is self-involved, throughout this whole hour. And I have to say, like, that would totally be the way I would describe myself. That would be the first thing I would say. Like, in talking to people about myself, like, in with the people who I'm close to, like, I think that would absolutely be the first way I would describe myself. I'm incredibly self-involved, but in some sort of sneaky way in the guise of being interested in other people. I mean, I actually am deeply interested in other people,
Well, I think
but in my actual life, like what I really am is very self-involved in the project of making the stuff that I like to make.
But I think that we both share the experience of being in conversation, being engaged in these moments on the mic, and in something that is very, is the word visceral and immediate, even if it's scripted. But when you're talking to another individual, that implies, in just by the fact that there's an other there, that those are the moments where if we are listening, we are not self-involved.
Yeah.
So that is where we live our life.
Yeah.
And I think that the authenticity of what you do when you're in conversation with somebody is what makes the humanness so, palpable and so engaging. And I think that's the beautiful thing about people in general. And I find that when I'm doing it, and in terms of saying that it helps me in my life, is that when if left to my own devices, and if I wasn't in comedy or radio, I think I'd drift away into isolation and just sit and think about shit all the time. And I don't know how much I would talk to other people. I have longer conversations on my show than I have in my real life ever.
Yeah, I do too. Like a friend once said about me, like she gets asked, like, what's it like? Like, what am I like in real life? And she's like, well, he's like that, but he never talks to you for that long.
Exactly. Because we're thinking.
Or something. I don't know. I don't feel proud of it.
Well,
I know that it's not good.
But
I mean, and I also know that like one of the reasons, like the only way that you could become as obsessed with, creating an hour of radio where people are talking and every moment has meaning, like the only kind of person who would go into a project like that is somebody who is awkward in actual like social situations. Do you know what I mean? Like in real conversations, I've had to like train myself, through adolescence and into adulthood to be present and to be
right
and to interact with people and I feel like it's that kind of focus that I brought to like making interviews happen and stories happen on the radio. And in a way, like it's like you're saying, like the most alive moments that you feel is when you're interacting in that way. I mean, I feel like the most like the easiest kind of interaction I have is the conversations I have in making the stories for the show.
Right.
I mean, other conversations I'm fine with. Like, I adore the people I work with. I'm not crazy. Like I'm close to people, but I know that the easiest and often the most fulfilling and usually the longest conversations of my day are the ones that happen when I'm getting tape.
Yeah, and when you were,
in a way, the most intimate.
Absolutely, I feel that way with crowds. I'm more intimate and more emotionally open with crowds and with people I talk to on the show than I am in my personal life. My personal life's a disaster, emotionally, in a lot of ways. And it's just, I guess this is the reason why we picked this to be our life's work, and the reason why it functions for us is that we are able to get out of ourselves. Were you a person, or are you a person that thinks about what people are thinking about you? In
the audience.
No, but I mean, like in life, growing up, because I find that being insulated in myself, that being self-involved, like if I'm in conversation, I'm making assumptions about what the other person thinks about me.
I'm only that way in the most like worried kind of way, where like I'm worried that I'm getting someone else mad, or I'm worried that they're bored, or I'm worried. Like I don't have a positive version of it where I think. Right. I think like they really like me now. Like I don't like that doesn't. That's harder to penetrate.
Have you ever felt threatened or like you were in a situation on the air or in an interview where you didn't know if you could handle the emotions that were being stirred up in your subject or in a conversation, or that you thought that they would be mad at you?
Well, there are times where I think that they might be mad at me because especially in the real reported pieces, like if somebody's doing something and we're documenting it, or I'm documenting it, and I disagree with them, or I'm going to say, if I want to say something negative about them on the air, it's not just like kind of a good rule of thumb, but I feel like it's only human decency to say it to their face. And so I go into the interviews knowing like, okay, I know this is kind of where they stand, and I'm going to have to confront them about this and this and this. And because I want to be able to say it about them, or like, this is my theory about them. I need to test it on them and give them a chance to defend themselves. And so I can be very nervous with that.
Isn't that a rush though? I mean, knowing that you have to do that, and it's like, even if it's a decent thing to do, it's not necessarily the first thing you want to do. I mean, it's a discipline. Like, when you're working up to that moment where I've got to call him on this shit.
Well, your Mencia interview, I feel like, was like masterful. I feel like the second Mencia interview was crazy.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
He just kept going.
Yeah.
It didn't stop.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't get so much of a rush out of it. I feel like I don't get so much rush out of it. For me, it's just like,
Oh, see, I would call that a rush.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean,
the anxiety?
Rushes aren't necessarily good all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a lot of times rushes are just like, I'm doing this. You're not like, this is fun, but here we
okay.
go.
Yeah. No, okay, then I definitely get that. Yeah.
Well, that's being alive. That's what makes you,
Yeah.
When you talk on the mic, are you talking knowing that your relationship with your listeners is a one-on-one relationship?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you can't perform on radio unless you feel that. Yeah, you have to be talking to one person.
And you know that in your head.
Yeah, that's just like, at this point, I'm not even thinking about that. That's just built into me.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah, and you are too, right?
Yeah, it's the only way I can think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we've done it.
Is that the dramatic end of the podcast? I think we've done it. I think it's fake. I think we're done.
That's our arc. Do you have kids?
No. Do you?
No. I've had 2 wives. I have no kids. You have a wife?
I have a wife.
That's good.
Yeah.
I don't have one right now.
That's going good.
It's going good?
Yeah.
That's good. It's not easy, is it?
No, it's not easy. No, she would say the same, I think. I feel like I can say that safely, knowing she's going to hear every word of this.
Does she listen?
Yeah, she's a big fan of your podcast, yeah.
She is?
She was listening before me.
Oh. Is she the one that said that the interesting thing about the Maria Bamford interview is when you realize that that I'm exactly the kind of man that Maria is talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. Wait, how did you, she did say that.
Well, because I talked to Birbiglia.
Yeah. She said that. Yeah. And and I have to say, I listened to the Maria Bamford interview, and that does make it really, really interesting. Yeah. It's in fact, I listened to it thinking, like, I wonder if this is like happens fast enough to work on our show. But it doesn't happen quite quick enough. I was just like, God, it's what a natural scene, but it doesn't happen quite explicitly enough to just excerpt.
Yeah, well, I can't, I can't draw those kind of things when I'm having a conversation. I was so thrilled to just have the conversation because she's like this unique, angelic being. And when I knew I was going to be locked in a car with her for an hour, I was like, oh my God, this is it. This has got to happen. And we're driving down the street holding these mics that we're
But wait, did you know when you got in the car that she was going to tell you this story that was going to be so similar to your own story, but her perspective? I
knew nothing. I don't know much about people I talk to. I mean, our approaches are so different. A lot of the people that I talk to, like, I listen to your show, but I'm not, I don't know everything about you, and I'm not, I don't have time to listen to a lot of stuff. People like Mencia, I don't really know him, and I only knew what I went into that interview was, how does a guy who is this hated publicly, live with himself? That's
a good question. Yeah.
That's
really, all you need.
And why is he, and why is he getting this short, like he is a comedian. And I didn't know the full story. See, this is how my investigative journalism works, is that I did that first interview without all the facts. And he was basically just steamrolling me, and he had a whole deliberate, like, he was going to reinvigorate his career and redefine himself on my podcast. And after I did that, I was like, I can't put that up.
Yeah.
And then some guys said, well, go talk to these other guys. And then when I was able to say, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And just to see the turmoil and pain of this guy.
I know, it made it so much fun to listen to. It was so interesting. It just really unspooled in a really nice way.
Yeah, I got to listen to it again.
It's very dramatic.
Yeah, well, this was, I found pretty dramatic for me. I think we did good. Do you feel satisfied?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't expect, I didn't expect you to come unraveled.
You didn't want me to cry?
That would have been good, but you know what? I think
next time.
There's no way I was going to get at it. So I will try to figure out a.
I usually don't talk about being self-involved. I think it's the first time I've ever talked about that on an interview.
Really?
Yeah.
I think people accept that with us, but I still think that that what you're doing for people, what I learned from radio and what I learned with the podcast more than anything else, is that honesty, however it comes out, and sharing the human experience in an intimate way, has it really helps people feel not alone. And I think not what you do.
I think so.
That whatever you may think of it, or whatever reason that people listen to it, that the struggles that you're capturing and what you're drawing out of people really makes people. It creates a community in a weird way of people who are listening to you alone. Feel not alone.
All right, good.
Is that good?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Ira.
Okay.
Okay, that's it, folks. That was me and Ira Glass. It happened. I feel like it went well. And I heard back from somebody that Ira was actually learned something from my interview style. It's not clear what he learned or whether he'll be using it, but I heard things from a friend that it did have an impact on him, and certainly talking to Ira had an impact on me, and that was a good one. It's a good experience for me. Because I always, I thought Ira was untouchable, and I believe I touched him. I know I did. I shook his hand. Anyways, that is the show. Please go to WTFpod.com and do some things. Get on the mailing list so you know what's going on. Kick a few shekels into the hat if you could. Throw me a couple bucks. I could use the Jack, the bread, the green. This is how I make a living. That is the truth. So if you could do that, go to the donate button, buy some of the new T-shirts. There's a lot of fun things, and I believe we're going to create a new site soon. That's a little easier to navigate. Go get the app. There's a WTF app. You can go to on iTunes, look up WTF Marc Maron, and get yourself that app thingy. If I had an iPhone, I would have the WTF app. All right, Punchline Magazine, JustCoffee.coop. You know the score. I'm going to Costco now. I'll talk to you later.